Welcome back to the Turn on the Music podcast. Welcome to season 2, episode 1. CJ's here in person this time.
Welcome, I am in person. I can see Kyle directly in front of me.
Yes.
And not through a video camera.
So the downside to that is he can see my ugly face and not my filtered face through my Snapchat filter.
Yeah, no, not much difference.
It's awful either way. So you've been here for a day and a half?
Mm-hmm.
How's Ohio treating you?
Ohio is very interesting in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone to some really cool locations, and I'm enjoying.
Those locations are not sponsored?
Those not sponsored, those locations. But it's fun. It was cool. The flight was good. Came in. It's nice to be here. Nice to be able to hang out for the weekend.
Cool.
Get some things done.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've been working on the podcast. We've been doing some live streaming. We've been getting things ready for season 2. And we're starting with season 2. But before we do that, are you listening to anything?
I know we're going to get into conversation about this particular artist, but I've been listening to a lot of Victor Wooten lately. Mm-hmm. Some Nickel Creek, mm-hmm. which after this episode launches, we had the pleasure of listening to their first release in a few years. So that's nice to be able to start listening to them again and get into their new stuff.
Yeah.
And that's about it. Not much outside of that. Maybe some audiobook stuff because mm-hmm. we are focusing on books a little bit.
Right. And just so you all know, we're recording this on a Saturday. This Sunday, we're actually going to go live to listen to that Nickel Creek. So if you're not followed us on Twitch, the link will be in the show notes. It's twitch.tv/turnonthemusic2. We do go live every Friday and Sunday and sometimes on Wednesday in the future. We have been going live every Wednesday, but in the future it'll be just sporadically. But definitely Fridays and Sundays. So make sure you're following us because we will be doing more live streams in the future.
Yes. Sundays, 7:30. Fridays, 8 p.m.
Yep.
And there's a lot of other things going on. We have YouTube now.
Yep.
Which we've shared through the live, so we'd like to share here. So we have a YouTube channel. Check that out. Mm-hmm. Please follow us there. And again, we have our socials on Instagram and Twitter, which we'll give at the end of the episode. So don't worry about that just yet.
Absolutely.
And what are you listening to?
The album that I've been listening to a ton is the Punch Brothers' Hell on Church Street Blues. I've been listening to that one almost every day for the last month or so.
Right.
And we did play that last night on our live stream. So
right.
Yeah, it's a great album. It's originally performed by Tony Rice, who was a bluegrass legend that passed, I think 2 years ago, maybe a year ago now. But they did it for him as a dedication to him and wanted to present it to him, but he passed before they finished the album, so he never got to hear it. But it's a great album, one worth checking out.
Very nice.
Yep.
What was the name of it?
Hell on Church Street Blues.
Hell on Church Street Blues.
Yes.
So yeah, that was the first time I listened to it when we went live this past Friday, and it's a great album. It was very nice, and I know some of our listeners were very much into it and all that stuff. So it's very cool that we were able to do that. Yep. Especially we did that together live.
Yeah, for sure.
So
what
are we doing?
So season 2 is going to be the season of Wooten. So we're going to be doing Victor Wooten's first book, The Music Lesson. I'm holding it up just like you can see it because you can't. I'm so used to doing this on Twitch. But yeah, so this is, we kind of joke that this has kind of become my Bible recently. I refer to it a lot. I've recommended it a lot and
definitely bought copies for people as well.
Yeah, I actually keep 4 or 5 on hand at all times. I'm actually running low. I think I've only got 1 left. So I've got to buy 1 or 2 so I can give them more.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
I've bought them and sent them, but I've never had a few on hand. Maybe I'll do the same thing.
Yeah, so I always try to keep a couple on hand. I think I've got 1 left. So, and then we're going to go through chapter by chapter, talk about this book because we think it's worth it, and there's a lot of really great stuff in here, and just stuff that's I think worth sharing and learning about. So,
Yes, I agree. So the first book is the music lesson, then we go into the spirit of music, which is the second book. So the most of our episodes are going to be focused on this,
Right.
but we're taking elements out of each chapter that we feel are important elements, and if we both have read the book. We don't know what elements that we've chosen for each chapter.
Right.
So it'll be very interesting, even for us as we go through this process, to see what I share versus what Kyle shares and all that stuff. And that's exciting too, because he may take stuff out that I didn't, and I may have taken stuff out that you didn't. I think we're going to be pretty aligned with some of it,
so too.
but it's going to be very interesting to see what we do.
Yep.
So
shall we begin?
we should. And you totally brought up, and I didn't even think about it. There's 2 parts before the first chapter, which they call measures. And Kyle brought up the fact that there is a grace note. And then after the grace note, there's a thing called the beginning, which is actually the prelude, which leads into measure 1, which is chapter 1. So I'm going to let Kyle take it from here because that was all on him.
So the premise of the book, for if you haven't read it yet, this is the spiritual and musical journey of Victor Wooten, and there's different aspects or different beliefs of how this all came about. In fact, in the beginning, he says something like, "Some of this book is true, but don't try to figure out what's true." Or is that here? Everything in this book may be all wrong, but if so, it's all right. And then at one point he says, don't try to figure out what's actually true and what's not true, because it's all true but not true at the same time. Truth. What is truth? And by the way, if I always tell you the truth, you might start to believe me. And the main character in this book is a man by the name of Michael. And this is based on the life story of Michael Kotz, who is a friend of Victor Wooten's and a fabulous cello player. There's a video of him on YouTube playing cello on a skateboard, which I will find, and if it's still out there, and I will link to you in the show description, or the show notes. But there's a lot of really great quotes that are in this book that I think are worth discussing. And I think right on page 1, I mean, the first 2 quotes that I've underlined are, you are already successful. The rest of the world doesn't know it yet. You are already musical. You just don't know it yet. So they talk about, and I think this is a great point. Both of these lines are great. So much of, at least for me, this book has been a way for me to, get away from my negative brain. And this first line, that you're already successful, the world doesn't know it yet. My brain tells me that I'm not successful. Every day, that's what I go through. And hearing something like that, that it's not just me, it's like the whole world doesn't know that I'm successful yet, which is kind of cool. But the fact that you were already musical, and I think that we've talked about this a lot, how music is all around us and everything we do is music. It produces some sort of a sound or rhythm or something. There's something about everything that we do. There's something musical about it.
Absolutely. There's, anything that we come across produces something that aligns to the rhythm of the day. It could be as funny as I was walking through Home Depot with my friend, and the cart had this weird rhythm to the wheels. I was like, "Do you hear that rhythm?" And it was like, and I was sitting here going, I'm like, and it's just, prior to that, I would notice it, but I didn't think too much of it. And then reading the book again, because it's the second time I'm reading it, I'm like, it really is true. And I was more aware of what was happening around. And even with the wind blowing, I mean, today, as we record, it's crazy windy outside. And there's a rhythm to it. There's a rhythm to the way the wind blows and the trees bend and the different things within the wind and the way they move. It's just, there's something fluid to it. And it is, I think, and I think what you said, I agree. I find myself every day stating whether I'm successful or not, and I always feel that I'm not. And it's a tough thing to do, to remind yourself that you got this and you can do this. And this is a very good quote for that reason.
Yeah, for sure.
Well.
And then the next quote that I have here is, it says, like one hand clapping, a one-sided relationship never works. And what he's talking about here is, there is a relationship between you and music. And I think that's something that we've been trying to, I guess instill on the podcast, because we've talked about, how, and this comes up in the second book a lot, that we don't share music as much as we used to. We're, the great thing about the iPod that came out, in 2002?
Early, yeah.
It gave us the ability to bring music with us, but it also made listening to music a solo action.
Right.
It was put your headphones in, grab whatever music you want. But back in the day, I mean, we've talked about it this weekend, and we've done it. We just put records on and just listen to them. But that was the thing that we did. We would all kind of gather around together and listen to music. I remember when We Are the World came out. I remember listening to the heck out of that thing.
Oh,
my mom
yeah.
and my dad.
Yeah. And that, but that's kind of what sparked this 20 some odd years ago.
Right.
Is you going, and we mentioned this on the podcast before, you going into, I think it was Mr. Cheapo's, and you picked up Live at the Quick. I think it was. Or it was one of those.
It was the Live at the Wetlands from Blues Books.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
the Robert Randolph
Yes,
album.
Live at the Wetlands. Okay, so you picked that up, and you're like, you need to listen to it. And we met up, and I listened to it with you, whether we were driving or whatever. But that whole thing is, it's not being done anymore.
Right.
And we isolate ourselves into this world of our choices of music, and no one around you knows what you're listening to. Mm-hmm. And not that that's a bad thing.
No.
But it may change how we look at the everyday. And that, like, one hand clapping, one side relationship never works. We're talking about music, but this works across the board.
Right. And I think that's one of the big problems with what's going on in the world today is that we're thinking about ourselves too much. We don't think about, what other people are doing. And one of the things that we've talked about is, we're going to share not only Victor's music through this, but there's a great not interview. It's a commencement speech that he gave, and he talks about being selfish, and he says that it's okay to be selfish as long as you take others into account. It's okay to think for yourself, but as long as that makes other people better too. He says it much better than I did, but
it's the constant working on yourself to show yourself that you are good.
Right.
You're good at what you do. That you're good, whatever it is, you're a good person, you're a good friend, you're a good family, good, whatever you want to say, but you're bringing other people along with you when you do that.
Right.
And that's what a lot of this is about. And it's just the way he goes about it in the book is so unique. Which is why I think he says, whether it's true or not, just read it.
Yeah.
Because you don't, if you try to figure out what's really happening, you're never going to get what you want out of the book.
Right.
Or what he wants you to get out of the book.
Right. Yeah. And because there's a lot of stuff in here that's just kind of weird, and not possible, but at the same time possible. It's kind of weird.
Yes.
And you'll understand more about that as we go along. But let's move on to the first chapter, because that's where this wacko Michael finally shows up, and it everything. What you'll realize about Michael, and Victor says this a lot, he's never not teaching. He's always teaching you something, and even the first time he shows up, Victor says, "How did you get into my apartment? You don't have a key." And he says, "I don't need a key." And he turns that into a lesson about, when Victor tries to play with him, that, Victor couldn't do it. And he goes, "Well, why can't you do it?" Because I don't know the key. It links all to this. It's just kind of cool.
Well, and the thing is he doesn't do it as a chapter. He calls this the first measure.
Right.
And as a musician, as you know, we play through measures.
Mm-hmm.
We play through measure one, measure two. We start at measure one, we go to the end. And what's beautiful about it is that, the first measure is groove. This is what it's called. And Kyle made a point to I totally forgot about it, that there are music notes at the beginning of each chapter that are related to the music lesson, which is an album that he put out.
It's a song.
The song, I should say.
The song is called "The Lesson," and it's in the album Palmistry.
Right.
But every measure is a measure of that piece
song,
of music.
Right.
So it starts out, with that little groove, which is awesome. It's just everything is done so thoughtfully through this whole thing.
Right. So I don't know how you want to go about doing this, because no, because
I don't either.
so
I'm kind of figured out as I go along.
no, and so I took different pieces out, and I think for me, the things that I started taking out hit when Michael entered the storyline.
Yeah.
And one of the first things I picked out was on page 16 of the book. He says, Victor's asking him, "Are you the teacher?" And he said, "I'm not." Basically, he said, "I'm not." And the one that he says he's the teacher of nothing.
Yeah.
Like that's what he is.
Yep.
And it stands out. He goes, "I teach nothing because there's nothing to be taught. You already know everything you need to know, but you asked me to come, so here I am." And I think that's interesting because what do we know?
Right.
So he's saying we already have a notion of what's going to happen. The knowledge is being given to us.
Yeah.
We just haven't gotten to the point of being able to bring it together and put it out in front of us.
Right.
And then I'll add this one, and then he goes at the bottom of that page. He goes, "You could only teach yourself. Until we live in a day where I can physically implant knowledge into your brain, I can teach you nothing. I can only show you things."
Right.
And I think that's a huge thing. And this comes from, me going to school to become an educator. I never looked at teaching as teaching.
Right.
I looked at showing. Because the students never going to learn anything if I'm just telling them how to do it.
Exactly.
I need to show them how to do it. And that kind of stood out to me in this whole thing. So that was that start the whole thing for me. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm totally with this. Like, I don't want to teach you. I want to show you how to do it. That doesn't make me a teacher.
Right.
That just shows me somebody who's willing to pass on the knowledge to you.
Right.
So you can learn how to do it yourself.
And for me, when I first read this book, it made sense to me, but I took it this way because I've done a lot of teaching. I've had hundreds of students probably at this point in my career, but I learned that what I'm really doing is teaching the kids how to teach themselves. So I'm essentially teaching them to be a teacher. So I would show them, I would guide them to the right response. I do it with my dogs too. I train them in a certain way, and I always tell when I'm working with dogs, I always say, don't set your dogs up for failure, set them up for success. But you can still challenge them at the same time. So like we were just talking before about, when we're eating our lunch, when I eat my dinner, I sit on the floor with my food on the floor. My dogs don't bother me. And it's just one of the things that I did a long time ago is I would just put food on the floor and it's not yours to touch until I tell you can touch it. So I give them the opportunity to succeed, but I challenge them at the same time. And I think that's what teaching is all about. And that's what Michael does, I think, throughout this entire journey.
Absolutely. There's never a point where you feel like he's just drilling information into Victor. He's guiding Victor to find what he already knows.
Right.
And just to see it differently. Absolutely.
Yep.
Do you have anything that comes up after that?
I do.
Around the same area?
Yep, right around the same area.
Nice.
And this is an interesting one, and it's one that I've thought a lot about, where he talks about the word music.
Go.
So your first two were exactly my first two,
Okay.
and I guess my third one is your
exactly
third.
Perfect.
So what he says, MU is an ancient word for mother, and SIC is an abbreviation for the word science. So you put it together, music is the mother of all sciences. Which I think is really interesting, because if you think about it, there's so much that, that if you think about the way music works, like it really does encompass, physics and mathematics and, reading, and it takes everything into one, I think. Because like if you think about, like, for instance, the trumpet or the French horn, for example, mathematically, the way that works is that tubing has to be a certain length for that instrument to sound right. A guitar, when you shorten the string by exactly half, it's an octave, right? If you cut the vibrations of a note from 440 to 220, it's an octave down. That's all math and science. Like, so it's all there, which I think is really kind of interesting.
And because that's the other thing, the vibrations, like you said, the weird tuning. 440 means that something's vibrating at 440 whatever per
Vibrations per
second.
minute,
Yeah, per minute. So it's just that thing, and that's the whole idea, is that it's not even you can feel that vibration.
Yeah.
So whether you hear it or not, you could feel that. It's just like the wind. Mm-hmm. You could hear the wind, but when you go out there, you're going to feel it as well.
Right.
And that's the thing. So yeah, that's definitely one that kind of popped out at me as well. So
And later on in this chapter, I think it's this chapter anyway, they talk about how things that start vibrating never stop vibrating.
yes,
And I love that, because he even says that thoughts are vibrations. So everything that we do is a vibration. And I think Victor brings it up in his commencement speech. We're going to have to link that to this episode. But he says, if everything that we do is a vibration and everything we say is a vibration and it never stops vibrating, think about the vibrations that you're putting out into the world. And are they worth putting out into the world?
right, exactly.
So,
And that, that's a life lesson there.
yeah.
Like, are you putting out in the world what you want to put out in the world?
Right.
Because it's going to be a constant.
Yep.
It's going to be there all the time. Now I go into the next page. Do you?
Yeah.
Where you go into?
I know that music is inside me and not the instrument.
Hold on a second.
I got one that you did.
No. I have at the top of the page, I play music, not instrument.
Okay.
And then the other thing because we see it, the listeners don't. When you read the book, you're going to notice that whenever Michael talks about music, it's a capitalized M. Mm-hmm. It's personified.
And isn't it italicized as well?
Not in everything.
Okay.
But it's a capitalized M. It's personified. He is definitely giving it a trait. And that is a key thing to this
I
whole
think
conversation.
the way I see it, because they refer to music as a female. I mean, music is her name. So it is the name. That's why it's capitalized.
Right.
That's
well, they don't talk about that as much in this one as they do more in the spirit of music.
That's true, but
no. But you're absolutely right.
It does say it somewhere here. I know.
Yeah. But they elaborate more in the second book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
they totally do.
And even at the last chapter of the book, they elaborate into it as well. So
yeah. So yes. Go ahead. Continue what you were saying, because I'm around that same thing.
what was I saying?
You were talking about.
Oh, right. And and I think more so the next thing, where he's talking about the way music works for Michael is, and I agree totally, because I'm a multi-instrumentalist, but he says that when you're working with music, the instrument doesn't matter. If you were to go up to someone, a novelist or someone who writes books or screenplays, like, would you ask them, oh, well, what kind of a pen did you use to write this? No, because it's not about the instrument that you're using to tell the story. Music's the same thing, and so many people look at, and I do it too. You look at, wow, like, you can play the piano, like, that's really hard. It's like, yeah, but you can write with a pen, like,
Right.
And I'm struggling, and we brought this up in prior episodes, like the guitar for me, there's some sort of a block there. I don't know what it is. It just doesn't sit right. But I picked up a harmonica a couple months ago. I was playing it first day, like, no problem.
Right.
Trumpet was the same way. Trombone was the same way. It just came second nature to me. Once I understood the French horn, how that worked, everything else brass-wise fell into place.
Right, and that's like me with woodwinds. Like,
Right.
they all made sense. Their
Yeah.
fingering may be a little bit different, but once you
Right.
get the fingering, you're good to go.
Yeah.
And I totally feel that. That's why you have a lot of brass players that play all the brass, a lot of woodwind players that play all the woodwind, and then you have your percussionists that are multi-talented because of the fact that their hand-eye coordination is ridiculous because they play the drums, and the same thing with pianists and all that stuff, and which brings me down to, I don't know if you have more to talk on that, but there's one thing that I thought came about when he talks about his problem.
Go for it, because I don't think I have it.
So at the bottom of page 19, which is after this conversation of I can play any instrument, blah, 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 and he goes, your problem is this. And I think this is very interesting because this was said to me about the saxophone. He said, you have been trying to tell your story with a bass guitar instead of through it. And when I was learning saxophone, I was so hung up on technique.
Right.
I don't think I have a great technique when it comes to playing saxophone. I've been told by people I play very well. I don't think I do. That goes back to how you feel and put yourself out there and the whole good and all that stuff.
Right.
But because I was his singer, and at the time that I was learning saxophone, my teacher knew this. He said, sing through the horn, which completely changed my mindset when playing saxophone. I never played saxophone after that. I sang through it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm the most amazing singer in the world, but singer's my spot. And if I take that process, me singing, because it's the most comfortable thing for me because I feel so good with it and all that stuff, and I take that and bring that to the other instruments, I actually feel more comfortable with the instruments.
Gotcha.
So that one kind of stood out on that part.
That's interesting. I remember when we saw Joe Bonamassa together, one of the things you said to me on the way home was he was singing through the guitar.
Yes. Yeah, he totally was. And that was before we read the book.
Yep.
And
it was before the book even came out.
And that's why the first chapter hit home, because I'm sitting like, I went through all this.
Yep.
Like, this is the same stuff I went through. I was going through it in high school, and I feel like I'm going in again now when I'm 20-something odd years later, or more than that, because I feel like it's 100 years ago. And it's true. He was singing through the guitar.
Yeah.
He wasn't playing guitar.
No.
That guitar was singing.
Yeah.
All he was doing was helping it sing.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yep. And I think part of the whole technique thing is, and they do talk about this. There is a whole chapter on technique, so I don't want to get into it too much. But you have to kind of understand the technique enough to not make it a hindrance, and to get out of the way of the technique, essentially.
It's like being a painter. Right. I'm going to actually use a better example. When we were in college and before you got into the college, and I'm sure you did too, you can take a test to test out a theory, which they talk about music theory. So this is unrelated, but so I took the test. I passed through the first 4 semesters,
right,
because of my background and what I had with school. And I still turned around to them and said, I'm going to start from theory 1. They're like, why? I said, well, a couple of reasons. I may have missed something.
Right.
And 2, I can get a couple easy A's and make some of the semesters a little bit easier for me. So I'm going through this whole entire process. I'm in the 3rd semester, and I'm just like, they're teaching you the laws or the rules of music, which we're going to talk about as in other chapters.
Yep.
And she kept saying, well, you can break the laws afterwards. This is a conversation I have with the professor. And it's the same thing with playing.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to learn a technique, but eventually you're going to come into your own, and you're going to have a different technique.
Yeah.
You'll still have that foundation there, but you're going to find different ways of doing things. We shared this on the live show. I saw Big Bad Voodoo Daddy in concert, right? Big Bad Voodoo Daddy in concert. I'm watching the saxophone. A saxophonist went from a saxophone to a clarinet to a soprano sax to a tenor. I think he even played one brass instrument at one point. And there was a point where he was playing something on the tenor sax, and I was watching his right hand, which is typically on the low end of the sax, and he would come around and he'd hook it behind the horn on the top, and he'd flip a key and he'd go back down. So it's when he was doing a trill or something, he brought his right hand up and brought it back down.
Yep.
No one else I was paying attention as a saxophonist going, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a cool technique.
Yeah.
No one taught him that.
Yeah.
He probably was like, how am I going to do this to really make it sound right? You know? So,
that is interesting.
Yeah. I have more, but you go first.
This is a question that I have asked, and it's part of our interview process. Is music a language? And I think, I have not met a musician yet who says no.
Music is totally a language.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the reasons that, and Victor says this too, it's one of the reasons that we don't have a lot of, one of the reasons music is so difficult for people is they don't treat it as a language. They try to learn it as something that's completely different. If you think about the way you learned English, you learned it from probably your parents mostly, just listening to them. But what happens the first time you go into a music lesson? First thing you do is try to read notes.
Right.
You don't listen. You don't try to play along with something by your ear,
But it's true. Yes, you're reading notes, but you're reading notes.
Yep.
And if you go to any country, you can talk to somebody through music.
Yeah.
Even if you're playing something that's different than they would be playing, you still can make it work.
Yep, absolutely.
It's a conversation that you can have.
Yep.
No matter what.
Yep.
And that's I agree. I don't think any musician will say it's not a language.
Yeah. And I mean, if you really think about it, if you think about it this way, music has 7 letters. We actually have 12, but there are 12 different notes. English has 26 letters. So there's a comparison there. And then you have, you take those letters, you put them into words in English. We call them chords in music. We take those chords, we put them into phrases. In English, we call it sentences. We take those sentences, we tell a story with it. Tell a piece of music. It's all a story. The interesting thing to think about, if you think about it this way, if English has 26 letters, and music only has 12, shouldn't music be half as easy as English?
That's not in the book. Stop thinking so hard. No, but that's actually a good question. Wouldn't it be easier?
Yeah.
I think and think about it this way. So I'm going to take that one more step further.
Mm-hmm.
We have words that have variations on themselves.
Right.
Read and read.
Mm-hmm.
Spelled the exact same way,
Yeah.
but depending upon the context of the sentence,
Yep.
one's going to be read as read and one's going to be read as read.
2, 2, and 2.
Right, 2, 2, and 2. And unless
6.
you're... And we're done. But it's true. If you don't know the context of the sentence, you don't know how to read that word.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're telling me I'm going to the market, I know what that is because I know what the word to is in that sentence.
Yep.
But I don't know how I'm reading the word read or read until I hear that, I see the sentence in the It's the same thing with music.
Yeah.
You know, we read the music because we're taught to read the music. And I'm using the word taught there on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It's not until we stop being taught how to read the music that we actually play the music.
Right.
Yeah, that was a little philosophical right there. Made that happen. So you skipped to the language thing. I just want to bring it back a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
There's one thing I want to bring it back to. So on page 21 in the book, he states, Victor states that he was upset about an outburst that he had. And he said something to, I don't know, I guess no one ever taught me music this way before.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael's response was, therein lies your first problem. Victor goes, problem? What do you mean by that? And he goes, you still think you could be taught.
Right.
And I love that because that goes back to what we were saying. We aren't teaching.
Right.
We are storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
Every teacher is a storyteller.
Yep.
The way the teachers teach are telling stories because we want those stories to pass on to the next group, to the next group, to the next group. That's how stories were passed on in the past before they started writing.
Yeah.
So as a teacher, you're showing your student how to solve the problem,
Mm-hmm.
how to get to the next step,
Yep.
and all that stuff. And that's what makes a teacher because you're empowering them
Right.
to say, I got this.
Yeah.
But you're also empowering them to say, I got this. What can I do next?
Right.
Like asking the right questions. Because if they don't ask the right questions moving forward, they're going to struggle moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. We're never taught to ask the right questions.
Right.
We're just, yeah, you can ask that question. But is it really the right question?
Right. Right. And what's interesting that you bring that up, you say that all teachers are storytellers. Like this book is a story that's teaching you how to learn,
Right.
essentially.
Right. And
So-
this is not like, this, and these are all, I say this about all teachers. This is no matter what you teach. When you have an enthusiastic math teacher, they're not teaching you math.
Right.
They're teaching you the story of math.
Right.
And because they're teaching you the story of math, you are so much more you're even more encouraged to try it, and you're more engaged to do it because of the fact that there's enthusiasm behind it.
Right.
When you have someone standing in front of you, I don't care what grade level you are, that's like, okay, 1 + 1 is 2. All right, that's great. Now you're not going to listen to that.
Right.
And it makes it boring.
Yeah.
I had a great math teacher I was like 9th or 10th grade. I forget what grade it was. I had him first period. This is the last thing I wanted to do was math in the morning. He kept me engaged all the time.
Yeah.
Because of the way he taught, the way he spoke, the way he was as a person. And he brought that out in everything that he did in the classroom. And I'll tell you one funny story to that because it leads to, it talks about, I was in theater at the time. And at the time it was getting to like tech week. So we were there like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I came in one day, I was so tired. And he knew I had the tech thing. And one of the things he used to do in the classroom, which I thought was hysterical, was he would bounce the ball a tennis ball on your desk to wake you up. So he'll stand and he'll bounce it, and it would wake you up. So I was nodding out, and he tosses the ball, but it goes a little bit past me. So as I'm nodding out, I put my hand up and I catch the ball. And he looked at me, he's like, oh, okay, I guess you're awake. And I handed him my was. But the thing is I never got yelled at. He knew every student, what they were doing and what they had to do. And everyone was always engaged because of the way he told his story through math.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. But continuing on with your
Music as a language?
music as a language.
I didn't highlight it. I don't know why I didn't highlight it, but I was going over it this morning. There was Michael says to Victor, why is it that when I ask you a verbal question, your answer is immediate and direct? But when I ask you this, and he starts to play a little thing on the guitar, you don't seem to know how to answer. Don't you know this song? I mean, right there he talks about, and if you go back to a couple months ago where I posted the music as a language video from my Twitch live stream, you know, I showed how there are different songs that have these conversations and they go back and forth, you know, and that's one of the things that, you know, I don't think we do enough. There's so much that we can do musically that asks a question. There are ways to respond. You know, I can influence people, and I do it all the time. You know, I can play one chord and get you to say, I've done this to choir. I play a chord. All right, sing the next note, and they know the next note exactly. How do they know that? Sorry, I snapped, and Lewis hates it when I snap, and I snapped, and
Lewis being his dog, just so you know.
Yeah, poor Lou. I'm sorry, buddy. But yeah, I can play one chord and tell you to sing the next note, and more than likely you'll sing the next note that I want you to sing. So it just shows how you can certainly ask a question and get a response. But what you'll find is that it's not just notes. Like, I can play something a certain way and influence your dynamics and your articulation and all this sort of stuff, how you breathe. Like, there are ways to do that once you understand how music is a language and how to use it.
Right. And you were talking about how we learn the language and how we're not just learning it, we're listening at first.
Yeah.
And that's where he brings up jamming, and how when we were sitting around with adults as kids, we were jamming with them because they were speakers already.
Exactly.
And we were just listening to what they were saying.
Yep.
So one of the things Michael brings up in here is, why don't we let beginner musicians play with professionals? Because if they started jamming at such a young age and not thinking about the theory of the music or learning how to read the music, they're going to understand it better.
Right.
We didn't learn English and how to speak by reading books and going to a classroom. We learned it from hearing people speak. And some people caught it quicker. Some people took it a little longer. And I say the ones that were taking it a little longer, but it's just because they were still trying to take it all in.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. So you know what? It doesn't mean everybody's going to learn at the same pace, but
Right.
you have the opportunity to be with somebody that's like, I got this. Listen, listen to me. And that was the thing that I think, because it came naturally. It was a natural thing.
And looking back, you know, just thinking back to my first piano lessons, I remember my piano teacher playing duets with me like second, third week. And not just like repeating what I was playing, like actually playing a piano part underneath me while I was playing.
That's awesome.
So
my teacher was a little old school when it came to saxophone, but he handled it in such an amazing way that I never felt discouraged. So every technique is different. But I think it needs to change a little bit because we are changing.
Yeah.
And how we do things are changing. And especially the kids nowadays are changing how they take in information. And that's something that I kind of got out of this. It's my thoughts after reading, like, even through this first chapter is, you know, if we change the way we teach, we change the way we learn. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
And it's not that we're not teachers. It's just that we're going ourselves, like I said before, we need to show. Everything's about show.
Yep.
Right? When I there have been many a times at work where I take it out, where I have to, or not that I have to take a time, but someone's asked me, how do I do this? I can go ahead and do it. And there's some times that maybe it's quicker for me to just go ahead and do it because maybe there's a time crunch. But if I know that there's time to do it, I show them. There was the other day, someone was like, I was like, oh, you need to do this. She goes, can you show me how to do that? And then we got to the desk and she's like, why don't you just do it for it? I'm like, no, I'll show you how to do it. I want you to get comfortable. And if you don't need, you're not sure again in the future, let me know. And I took the time, guided her through the process, you know, and took this opportunity to say, okay, click on that, and took them, gave them a moment to click on it. And it's amazing how people respond to that, because I'm not telling them you're ignorant, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know how to do it.
Right.
So for me to get upset with you for not knowing how to do it, that's on me.
Yeah.
Right. And that doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. It's just that there are other things that you're better at, and you just don't have to worry about this right now.
Yeah.
This happened to come into play.
Right.
Now you need to know how to do it. Great. I'm going to show you how to do it. And keyword, I never say teach, show.
Yeah.
I try. I mean, and I went to school for teaching. So it's not like it's not like I don't see teachers. I see teachers as amazing people. And the more amazing teachers are the ones that show.
Yep.
And it keeps going back to this whole thing. So I think that's why this book, I think, is so great for not just musicians.
Yep.
And I love when they get into the whole Miles Davis thing.
Yeah.
Which is basically Victor is, trying to get Victor to not think and just play. And that's very cool.
Yeah.
And that leads into what? You have more, don't you?
I do have more. Do you have more?
Go ahead, go you. I've been talking.
Where was I? Yeah, I did all that.
We're leaving the page turns in just for the
We're analog.
Kyle took notes on his computer. I read it, took handwritten notes while using the audiobook.
I have notes in here too.
No, I know he has notes in his book, but I read mine, and then I listened to it on audiobook, and then I had the book and the audiobook, and I took notes at the same time.
One of the things that, because I've done this with my kids, Michael says, no, you should find the groove before you start playing. It doesn't matter what you know, whether you know the song or not. You need to know, essentially, you need to know the groove of the song and feel the groove. There have been so many times where I've been trying to work with a kid, and they just sit down, they start playing it, and they fumble the beginning, and I go, all right, wait, like, take a breath before you start, and then hear it in your head first. It's almost like a meditation, almost. Like, imagine yourself doing it perfectly right away, and then go do it.
Right.
So you have a frame of reference.
Right, and we talked about this in the car earlier, where, you can't just play without the groove. And now, when you hear the word groove, you automatically think it's like jazz. The groove works across the board.
It does.
We're both classically trained musicians, right? I went for opera and classical music, classical singing. Kyle had played piano, played classical and the French horn and the piano, and he sang as well. And at no point did I feel that there wasn't a groove.
Yeah.
Like, there was a groove to everything. I don't care if I was singing an operatic aria, if I was singing a classical piece, there was a groove to it. There was something I had to get into, or a mindset, in order for me to sing the song.
Yep.
And that was one thing that was very big for me. I had to understand, if the song was in a foreign language, I had to translate it. But if I didn't translate it and I knew how to read the foreign language, if I saw the subtle words in there, actually, let me rephrase that. There were some languages that I didn't have to translate to know what it meant.
Right.
Because you could tell by the way the song was written and do it. And then when you hear the piece play and once you find that groove, you can make it work.
Yeah.
And I did that with some songs. Before I even learned the songs, I just tried it out. And, I may have butchered the language a little bit, but I figured it out.
Right.
Italian songs for me are a little bit easier. I understand the language. But whenever I sang French, I hate that language. I say that with love, just because I cannot do the language justice.
Right.
But even with that for language, with the pieces and the way they were written, even if I couldn't translate it or really get the word out, I still kind of was able to get the feeling out.
Right.
Because you find the groove to it.
Right. And I think another great example, we've played the group Polyphia before.
Yes.
And for those who don't know Polyphia is a group that they identify as a genre called math rock, which is odd time signatures that change usually every measure. And you think about groove as being the same thing over and over and over and over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, But Polyphia is not that. It is anything but that. But there is still a groove. You can still, bob your head, and there's still stuff there that is a groove.
It's gonna come together. It's like a salad.
Yeah.
You got to start with the greens, but you're gonna throw whatever you want in there and make that thing tasty.
See, I wouldn't go with salad.
But still,
Fried rice. fried rice. You start with your base of cold, day-old white rice, and you throw whatever, or a stir fry. Why would you go with rabbit food?
Because you can put bacon on a salad.
Yeah, but there's
And
too much
eggs.
green nonsense in it. After this weekend, I will teach you that you do not need green stuff.
But it's very true. It's that same concept of even when you're cooking.
Yeah.
Except for baking. Baking's a little harder. But when you're cooking, you could change it up.
Yeah.
Like you're following a recipe, but you may say, hey, I'm going to throw a pinch of that in, a
Yep.
pinch of that in. And that's just the groove. That's what you're feeling at that moment.
Yeah. It's like when I was making the hamburgers yesterday. You said, why didn't you put the seasoning in the burger? Why'd you put it just on the outside? That's just the way I do it. I don't know. Why are you asking me questions? Did it taste good?
So I think that the groove relates to anything.
Yep.
It really does.
Yep.
You know, if you're going to write, you need to get into a mode, into a feeling of what you're going to write.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not going to sit down, you know, have happy-go-lucky music on in the background, beautiful sky, beautiful, and you're going to write a horror movie.
Right.
Like, it's just not going to happen. I mean, if you do, that's beautiful. That's fantastic.
Wasn't there a movie, was it Vanilla Sky, that was like that?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like you're gonna put yourself in that groove. So even if it's the brightest room in the house,
Right.
you're still gonna put yourself in a groove to write that horror movie.
Yep.
Like Stephen King,
Yep.
he doesn't shut his lights off because he scares himself.
That's right.
But that doesn't mean he's not writing scary stuff.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
The groove is it's such a cool concept to
Yeah.
take everything else.
And I think the end of the chapter, I don't know, do you have anything else you want me to close with how they close the chapter?
I think the only thing that he says that's related to groove, and I don't know if this is what you're going with it. He says, and I love this: never lose the groove in order to find a note.
Yep.
I don't know if you said that or I don't think you said
No,
that.
that was what I was just going to say the exact same
well,
thing.
then, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take it.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So basically, what he's going to go into in the next couple of chapters is, you know, all the different aspects of music. There are 10 that they talk about, and there are probably more, but those are the 10 main ones. But none of them are so important that you lose the feel overall. So never think that a note is more important than the overall piece.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he just starts to talk about where they go into the next chapter, which is
Next week's episode.
So
come back and listen to next week's episode.
Yes. Should we share just a little tidbit?
Yeah, go for it.
Basically, they're going to talk about the elements of music.
Yes.
And just wonder what that is.
Yep.
Because what I got out of it is music is elemental.
Yep.
I really did.
Yep.
It's for me as a musician, this book, when I read it the first time, just took me completely different musical journey.
Yep.
But reading it now, older and gone through what I've gone through and going through what I'm going through, I'm reevaluating how I see things and how I process things, and how I may approach a person, no matter what the situation may be. There's a lot to learn, and it's totally not a self-help book. It's just what I'm taking out of it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And what I would do with my students is the ones that have studied with me a long time, because I made this book a prerequisite to study with me at one point.
I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
But before then, when I had some students that were with me for several years. So what I would do is I give them a quiz, and I said, "All right, time for a quiz. We wrote 1 through 10. Give me 10 elements of music. The best they ever did, the one person did 4, which I think is scary.
But
But at the same time, when I did it myself, I got 5.
Because we don't think of it.
Right.
And
we don't teach it.
And that's what we're going to learn in the next chapter and how they approach it.
Yep.
But it's true. And they you know, there's an essence there, and they talk about essence. Yep. But it's true. We don't think of it. Because we're not taught to think of it that way.
Yeah.
We're taught to, okay, here's 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the C. This is the D. This is the E. This is how you play it on your instrument.
Yeah.
But you're not taught, okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Right.
What how does this music look?
Right.
Can you tap it out? Mm-hmm. Can you sing it in your head?
Right.
What does it sound like to you now?
We focus on basically 2 things: notes and rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are very few teachers that will talk about articulation or your tone. Or I was watching a video the other day. I've been trying to get my trumpet chops back in shape again. And I was watching this one guy. He says, "I have never had a teacher tell me where my tongue should be in my mouth." I was like, "Oh my goodness, me neither." Like,
That's
where's
true.
where's my tongue? Like, I remember when I was in choir. You know, my choir director told me where my tongue should be. You know, but it's like, when I'm playing the trumpet, I didn't know where it was. I had no idea.
And that's true, because on a woodwind instrument, you're pretty much keeping your tongue off the reed, because the reed is vibration that's creating the sound, whereas you guys are pushing the air through this small, tiny mouthpiece, and it's producing the sound.
Yeah, and what you learn is that even though the trumpet is, I don't know, was it 9 feet long? I forget how many feet it actually is. But, like, your mouth is part of that as well. And it's actually its own instrument, essentially. So the distance between, like, your lips and the back of your throat is a pipe. Mm-hmm. And by cutting the air, either doubling the speed or cutting the distance the air has to travel, you play a higher note. So it's not about, you know, the pressure in your lips or how tight you can make them. It's how fast you make the air in the back of your, or how short the air has to travel.
So you're saying that you're a tool.
I am.
Not in that sense. You're the tool that gets the instrument to play.
Yep.
And that tool, whatever that instrument may be, you could still play that instrument.
Yep.
It's such a weird thing to think about, because I never thought of myself as an instrumentalist that I can play different instruments.
Yeah.
Do I? I play some, but they're all related in some way.
Right.
Like, I still struggle on the piano. The guitar is like a brick wall for me.
Yeah, it's
you know,
me too. I don't know what that block is, but
and I'm hoping that, like, I'm trying to reapproach things and trying to, like, release my mindset that I can't do it.
Yeah.
You know, and as an adult at our age, not that we're old, but it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to take a couple months to get, you want to be like, I should know this.
yeah, that and poor Lewis. We keep snapping our fingers. But in the technique episode, you know, there's Michael and Victor talk about. Michael says, "What technique do you want to learn?" He said, "I want to learn how to use my thumb as a pick." He said, well, guitarists have been doing that for years. Why? Like, how come you can't do this? What's wrong with you? You know.
That's true.
So it's like the same thing. Like there are people out there. Like, I've got friends who can't read music at all, who've never taken a music lesson in their life. They can play the guitar all day long.
Right.
I've studied music for 30 years, maybe longer, 40 probably, and I can play a G chord. Like, that's about it.
Well, if you think about it, if we started 4th grade, we've been reading music since 8 years old.
Right. And studies have shown that kids learn languages faster than adults.
So why not teach the music even
as a
earlier?
language?
Like, my son is 6 years old.
Right.
I'm getting to the point where he's so into music that I'm ready to start teaching him. And I even asked my wife, I said, what do you think of me teaching him music now? She goes, I think that's a great idea. I don't care if it's just saying C, D, E, F, G on the piano.
I'm going to stop you right there.
Why?
Because you said the T word.
Teach.
Yep.
Did I say teach?
You did say teach.
Show him.
Yes.
Thank you for correcting me.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. I do. I want to show him I want to show him music.
Yep.
I want to show him music at a different capacity of what it is, which is just throwing on Cyndi Lauper on his iPad, which I love, which I freaking love. And I love the fact that he sings to it and he dances to it, but I want to show him how she got there.
Yeah.
That's what I want to show him. You're absolutely right. I meant to say show. Thank you. I appreciate the correction.
You're welcome.
The one time I'll appreciate a correction.
All right. Well, I think we're in a good spot to stop and get ready for next week. So, yeah.
Who's reading out the outro?
Not me, because I don't have it up. Do you have it up?
I guess I'm going to have to read it out.
All right, good.
All right. So we'll read out the outro, and you guys have a great week.
Yep.
Remember, Sunday at 7:30 p.m. we go live on Twitch.
Yep.
Friday at 8 p.m. Kyle goes live. I do not get to join him on that evening just because of prior commitments. And then we'll, follow our socials.
Yep.
It's all in the closing that I'll be doing.
Yeah. Ready, set, go.
Thank you for listening to the Turn on the Music podcast. We hope that you join us next week. Click on the link tree in our show notes to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. You can also subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channel. If you would like to continue the conversation, join us on our Discord. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend. And if you really want to help us promote the show, head over to Apple Podcast or the podcast service of your choice and give us a 5-star rating. Remember, always share the music.